All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about little shows on the television. You can switch it on and watch it if you like. It's on streaming. It's on HBO Max. It's called Euphoria, and we're going to talk about that on tonight on the Report from Tiger Mountain. Stick around and listen. All right, we're going to talk about Euphoria. I was a little bit inspired by Tim Wilms, who's just sitting here to my right, because there were people posting memes about Sydney Sweeney, and she was, scantily clad and doing all this kind of sexual activity on this show. And Tim was like, "Well, you should watch it and tell us what it's like." So I did, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I did. I downloaded HBO Max onto my little television here, and I watched 20 hours of the bloody show. You know what I mean? Watched 20 hours of it, ladies and gentlemen. And to be honest, the first 2 seasons of the show I thought was actually pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, it is sort of woke in some ways. Like, the cast is some woke. One of the main characters is a trans character. The lead character is Zendaya, who's like a mulatto. But she's kind of African American, but she's like played as a complete junkie. It's not a very complimentary portrait of an African American. And the trans person is just a complete pervert who's constantly obsessed with sex, who just meets up with older men who sort of rape her in motel rooms. I mean, this wasn't complimentary either. You know what I mean? So I thought this was kind of interesting. And then there were the 2 main white characters. There was, of course, Jacob Elordi played Nate Jacobs, and then you had Sydney Sweeney play Casey. And they were sort of, they were good white characters. I mean, Nate was made out to be some kind of, Bret Easton Ellis kind of, maybe American Psycho, Patrick Bateman-like character. Of course, you're not meant to like him, but you do like him, you know what I mean? And, he's incredibly handsome actor, and obviously this TV series launched his career, and Sydney Sweeney is absolutely stunning, and she's great in it. And the first 2 seasons, I thought, all things considered, were good, and that you had, Zendaya's character getting deeper and deeper involved with drugs because she was a drug addict, and that she got mixed up with this drug dealer called Laurie, and, who was kind of dangerous and scary, a bit like a character from Breaking Bad. And, I thought overall, as a portrait of kind of contemporary teenagers in America, I thought it was actually pretty well done. So I thought, well, good on them. The show is based on a show in Israel, apparently. It's apparently a little bit different, but I think the son of Barry Levinson, I can't remember his exact name, I think it's Sam Levinson, he has produced the show. But this new season, that brings us to the new season, season 3. So, it is true that in the new season, they are doing essentially humiliation kind of ritual with Sydney Sweeney's character. She gets involved, she becomes an OnlyFans star and just does all this sexual stuff. But I mean, Sydney Sweeney is quite a sexy woman. She's probably about 25, 26 now, maybe 28 even. And, she does all this sexy stuff in it, and some of it you could say is inappropriate or whatever, but I didn't particularly have a problem with that element of the storyline, outside of the fact that if I was Sydney Sweeney, I'd be saying, why in every scene are you making me out to be this slut? You know what I mean? Because I think they're, trying to make out Sydney Sweeney as a slut rather than just the character. But Nate Jacobs' character, played by Jacob Elordi, I mean, I don't think he would have come back, because he's essentially spent most of season 3, at least up to the point I've seen, because there's still about 2 or 3 episodes to go. They've just been torturing him. He owes money to some Iraqi mafia or something, and they've been cutting his toe off, cutting his fingers off. It's like every episode he loses an appendage. This is something that really annoys me. When you have a showrunner like this Levinson guy, and he creates his characters, and in season 1 and 2, they were pretty good characters. And you don't actually hate these characters, even though they have many flaws. You don't hate them. But he clearly hates them. And even the transgender character he sort of hates. You know what I mean? And it's all odd, because these are meant to be kind of white characters. But they're very negative. And even Zendaya, who plays the lead, in season 3, she gets mixed up with this Alamo. And he's got this whole band of black thugs. And, it's extraordinary. He's almost become the main character of season 3. This character Alamo, it's not played by Samuel L. Jackson or some kind of charismatic black actor that you go, oh, well, okay, he's the villain, but he's got a bad ass or whatever, and, he's interesting. It's just some fat black guy playing this character called Alamo. And in one of the recent episodes, they buried Zendaya alive up to her head, and then this black guy gets up on a horse and is going to, play croquet with her head. He doesn't do it, but I thought he's going to knock her head off. You know what I mean? So, it's some kind of, torture ritual. And this is not the first show where these characters, have proved popular with people or have resonated with the zeitgeist, and then the producers have felt they've got to torture them, you know what I mean? And this happened with the Joker, for example. The first Joker was it resonated with people, it particularly resonated with people on the right, and then they did the sequel where the Joker is kind of humiliated and tortured, and this basically flushed down the toilet for 2 hours. That's all that film is about, because it was like it wanted to change the narrative of what the first film was about. So the first Joker film was great. The second Joker film, you shouldn't even see it. And obviously, apparently, it's also happened to The Boys. I've sort of caught up with that show. There's a new season that's dropped. I haven't finished watching that. I watched a couple episodes. The character there is Homelander. He's like a kind of Superman who's sort of a bad guy. You know what I mean? Like, it tries to riff on, like the power you would have if you had superhuman powers and no one could stop you. You become a kind of megalomaniac psychopath. So it plays on that. And it was sort of interesting from that perspective. But, they've turned it into a cheap insult about Donald Trump. And I've seen scenes, obviously he dies apparently in the last season and he loses his powers somehow. And then, he like begging to suck the dick of the guy, the guy's been trying to kill him and everything, some kind of humiliation ritual for the Homelander character. He wouldn't do that, you know what I mean? The character was notoriously proud and arrogant, and if he did lose his powers, he'd just go, "Oh, just kill me then," you know what I mean? I think he was always aware that one day, somehow someone might get the better of him. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's my analysis of Euphoria and the way that many of these showrunners hate their characters. And I don't know why they do it, because if you create a show and you have good characters, give them a good ending. Even if the villains have to die, that's okay. There are noble deaths. There are ways that bad characters can die, for example, in Star Wars and, and many other, great films. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's my analysis of all that.